Hi there, Dave Levine here. Thanks for joining me again on this week's Sports Stories podcast. Today is episode number 18 and our special guest is Kevin Bowring. Last week we spoke with John Stanworth, who now works with the England Women's Cricket Department. Well, today we switch sports and countries. Kevin has had an amazing career working in education and rugby union. He's been heavily involved with both the English Rugby Union and the Welsh Rugby Union, making a significant impact on the sport. Having known and worked with Kevin over the years, I'm really excited about hearing more of his stories and allowing him to share some of his great expertise and wisdom in his very authentic, humble and natural way. So let's get on with the podcast and let me welcome today's special guest, former Welsh Head Coach and RFU Head of Elite Coach Development, Mr. Kevin Bowring.
Kevin, welcome to the Sports Stories podcast. It's a real privilege of mine to have you on the show today. I've really been looking forward to engaging with you, hearing your story. I'm not quite sure where it'll go because I'm kind of amazed by the depth and the length and the insights that I'm sure you will have. So we'll go where we go. What I tend to do is invite my guests to tell a little bit around who they are, what they've done. I'm sure many of the people are listening might know a little bit about your story, but can I start off by asking you just to share a little bit about your first memories of sport, and then we'll go into your career right through to you being the Wales coach and being an internationally recognised developer of people. So Kevin, a little bit about your first memories of sport and then we'll go from there.
I think you're saying I'm a bit of an old git, really. That's a long time ago, that first memory. You know?
Well, it's a good start.
Gosh, I think it's, do you know those summer evenings where your mother called you in from playing out in the street and said, you know, called me, came to the front door because we could play out in the street in those days. And she'd say, come on, coming in, you know, you've got to come in now. But Mum, it's still light, but it's 9:30, 9:45 at night, and we are still playing cricket because it was summer. It's still light. We are still playing cricket in the street. So I was born in a terraced house in Penedri, a street in Neath in South Wales. Across the street, my grandparents lived in another terrace house, and their garden backed onto the Neath Canal, where, would you believe, we learned to swim in the lock of a canal in those days. It was clean enough in those days. But of course, we played games. We played street games. So the pavement was the crease, and we bowled, chalked the wickets on the wall. We played football, rugby, cricket, all sorts of games there. And it's those memories of play, really, all sorts of games. We were fortunate also that about 5 doors down from our house, there was the chapel where I went to for Sunday school, and I went to the chapel until I was about 16. And behind the chapel, there was almost a triangular shaped playground with a roundabout, a slide, and some bars, and a rocking horse. But it was triangular, and we played. This was a great space to play, but of course you had to avoid all the roundabout and all the obstacles, as well as each other playing our touch rugby or whatever games we played. And the typical kids, I think I might have been one of the younger boys. So it was cross-age group. Mm-hmm. Often there were odd numbers, so we may, if it was 7 of us, we'd have 3 guys attacking the wide end of the playground, and the 4 guys attacking the narrow end, because that was fairer, wasn't it? And also we self-organized the games, we self-managed them and refereed them. That was until we had a chap from Rosser Street, just up the road, come and play. He was a couple of years older than us, and he wanted to referee all the time. And his name was Clive Norling, and he became one of the world's best rugby referees in the 1980s. He really refereed internationally, 6 Nations, 5 Nations, 6 Nations, World Cups, and started his referee career
with you
our playground in Neath. So, I mean, great great memories. And I should add that our terrace street, almost the parallel street further beyond, was Knoll Park Road, where the Knoll Rugby Ground was. That's the home of Neath Rugby Club. And in those days, of course, as a young kid, you watched Neath, and your heroes, your role models played for Neath there. And your dreams of wanting to play for Neath and Wales and beyond all emanated from those street games, really.
Is that why you went towards rugby as opposed to cricket and the other sports?
Yeah, the area in South Wales was rugby mad, of course. I went to Neath Grammar School, and Neath Grammar School was renowned for success at schoolboy rugby. My sixth form year, we had 6 Welsh secondary schoolboy internationals from one team in 1 year. So a third to a half of the Welsh under-18 schoolboy team from one school. And sadly, I wasn't one of those. So my dream of playing for Wales, didn't materialize.
You were in good company there, though.
Well, most Welsh people, they say that they're Welsh secondary schoolboys. They played for Welsh secondary schoolboys. Everybody in Wales is a Welsh secondary schoolboy, except me. So it was rugby was the passion. Cricket in the summer and rugby in the winter. My mother washing cricket whites one week, rugby kit the next week.
And were you better at rugby than cricket, obviously?
In the end, I had to choose. I played a lot of cricket, played sort of county schools under 18 cricket, but the rugby season starts to get longer and longer, pre-season tours, end of seasons, 7-a-side tournaments. And so in the end, you chose the game I loved, didn't you?
And so where did you go with that then? So you kind of came through school, you played the various different sports, then you had to choose a kind of a direction when you went from school. How did your career unfold from there?
What was interesting, my father was a carpenter, and he was a carpenter, the maintenance carpenter in the big factory in the metal box factory. And he used to do little weekend jobs for the managers of the factory. Building a wardrobe or a kitchen or for them for a bit of extra pocket money or what have you. And he always said, look, you've got to get into the management side of business, of industry. So I suppose I was influenced by that. Didn't know what I wanted to do really, but I started doing a degree in business studies, would you believe? And really hating it. Stuck it for a couple of years, and in between I was coming home from Polytechnic in those days it was, and I was playing cricket in the summer back in Neath, and a friend of mine who had gone off to university had come back and said, well, if you don't like it, why don't you reapply and become a PE teacher? Well, I was playing cricket, I was playing rugby, I had even started, I must have been, 19? Just over 19, and I was even started coaching the village under-18 youth team at that time as well. And so I thought, well, I might give it a go. I'm not really happy doing this business studies, sitting behind a desk for the rest of my life. I couldn't imagine that. I applied late to Phys Ed College, Borough Road College in London. I knew a couple of players from Neath Grammar School who had been up there. Mainly an athletics college it was, with Alan Pascoe, Alan Lurwell had taught there. Jimmy Biddle was the head of PE, was the Great Britain athletics team manager at the time. I'm talking early 70s. And I applied, I got interviewed about the last week of August, started in mid-September, and I had 4 fantastic years at the college as a training to be a PE teacher, got a degree in teaching, played rugby there, very influenced by a mad Irishman lecturer, Johnny Hunter, who I learned about the passion, the enthusiasm, the love of the game that he instilled. He inspired that love of the game with me, really, and he is still a lifelong friend, actually.
Gosh,
Just
gosh.
terrific.
So that was your introduction to being a PE teacher then. How long were you a teacher for?
I taught in all about 17 years.
Wow.
So I taught middle school age, secondary school age, and then I taught at a university. I lectured for 2 or 3 years as well, before working for the RFU in elite coach development. But my teaching, teaching PE and teaching rugby, of course, was great fun. Introducing the game to under 9-year-olds and trying to capture the magic of our game and enthuse players to enjoy the game. Right up, I suppose, then to coaching and coaching internationally.
Yeah. And
so I coached all levels of the game, really.
Yeah. And Kevin, what's really struck me is over the past 3 or 4 months, I've been speaking to a number of coaches who have come through a route of education into coaching. And can I ask you the question, what is it that we take from the education world that's really helped you or did help you within the world of coaching? I appreciate they're similar, but there's something about people coming through the teaching avenue that's really added to their coaching.
I suppose it's the concept of people development. It's about helping, inspiring, encouraging, stimulating people to learn, develop, to be the best versions of themselves, whether it's on the rugby pitch, on the games field, in sport, in music, in drama, in life in general. So I think there is a drive to help people be the best they possibly can be.
Where does that drive come from, or where did it come from for you, do you think? Is it something that was just innate, or did you pick it up along the way?
Well, later on in life, when we did some personality profiling, we did insights profiling. Now, lots of other sports may do Myers-Briggs or whatever. They're based on Carl Jung's typologies, I think, which is introversion, extroversion, thinking, feeling. And I came out as a preference for, in insights language, green energy, green-blue sort of energy. I could access some of the other energies, but my preference would be that green values, relationship-driven, understanding of others, supportive of others, which is not surprising when I've been a teacher, a coach developer all my life. It's about nurturing, supporting, developing others, whether that's your life experiences, your influences on you. A lot of teachers are involved in coaching. A lot of successful coaches weren't teachers as well. There's a good balance to it. But if you think of World Cup winning rugby coaches, not all were from a teaching background. Clive Woodward did, and Graham Henry did, but there were others, Bob Dwyer and Rod McQueen and Kitch Christie from South Africa. They weren't. They perhaps from a business background. But I suppose that drive to help others achieve and be the best they can be is a form of education, isn't it? It's a form of development.
So, Kevin, you've had a career through education and in coaching. Can you take us to a place whereby, is one of the highlights of your career, and how did that philosophy and that drive and that relationship kind of approach really play out to your advantage?
I think it was Dave Whittaker, who was the England hockey coach, gold medal winning coach, I think, in '98 Seoul Olympics. I think he is quoted as saying, "You owe it to your players to be the best coach you possibly can be." And I think that drive of continuous improvement, that drive to continually learn, and as old as I am, as much learning that I've taken through a career in sport, there's so much more to learn, David, isn't it?
Mm.
If you're curious, if you're open to learning, if you're hungry to learning. So I suppose the success story, I don't think is necessarily me. It's I reflected on seeing someone like Stuart Lancaster start his coaching career in the academy as an academy coach in Leeds, to develop as a head coach in the Premiership and the Championship, to come into the England pathway as a head of league player development, to coach England Saxons, to coach England, to be disappointed with the 2015 World Cup, to bounce back with such success at Leinster. Now that success story comes from, that success and disappointments, as we all have in our lives, comes from a continuous desire to learn, a hunger to get better. Is it Carol Dweck who talks about a growth mindset? That, and Stuart and many of the coaches that I was being fortunate to work with, I think have that desire to learn, that growth mindset, that hunger for learning, that continuous strive for being more effective and being the best they possibly can be, the best version, and that curiosity in looking for things which will add to their coaching armory to make them better and better. And I think that's the success story in people.
So what do you do in that place? So when you've got these coaches that are around you and you're in charge of their, or in charge is a strong word, but in support of their development, how do you help them when they've got that such a thirst for learning?
It's signposting sometimes, isn't it?
Right.
It's saying, look, it's trying to raise awareness of what would make you a better coach, and what do I think? What do you think? Let's try and explore that. And where can we go for learning? And we're signposting people to go there, to that course, to that environment, to learn from that, to that sport, to that coach, to that different domain, firefighting, military. We even went to magic management at one point, David.
What's that? What's magic management?
Talk about perception and deception in managerial business leadership terms, and influencing terms. And of course, this chap had taken my watch off as he was talking to me through deception and perception. And actually, some coaches use that in rugby in terms of trying to deceive opposition and fool opposition and what have you. So, there's lots of places, never-ending domains to learn from. I think there is a skill in coaches in being able to synthesize some learning from one domain in order to apply it in their coaching environment.
Go on, say a bit more about that, because I think that makes a lot of sense to me, but I'm just for those that are listening, what do you really mean?
Well, I suppose it's the so what question. So what have you taken from that course, that conference, that cup of coffee with a coach on another sport? What have you learned? So what does that mean for you and your coaching in your environment? Not necessarily to implement straight away. Sometimes let the learning wash over you, and actually there'll be an issue, a problem that will pop up in your coaching in the future, and you'll say, haha, I remember that experience. I remember talking to so and so and so. I remember what they did. I may apply it there. That might help me solve this. So it's synthesizing learning from some domain and being open to that and hungry for that, but having the ability to say, so what does it mean for me and my coaching at this moment in this context? And that's quite a skill.
Yeah. And you really raised that question for me, Kevin, about the idea that, we can learn from so many different environments, but that learning is not the same as the environment you're in. And,
so not copying.
So we can't just copy it. Yeah, we have to translate it. And there's something for me also about, the lovely world that you've described there, how so many of these other environments, i.e. the business world, could also learn so much from the rugby environment or the teaching environment, but it's not the same, but we can take some principles or gems from those environments.
And that's avoiding the copying. It's what is the principle, the underlying factors I can take and apply in my context. It's not about cloning coaches. I've never believed in cloning coaches, for example. And I know we have competence-based assessment and we have to go through various things like that with coaching qualifications and awards. But I believe in the individuality of the coach. I believe in the uniqueness of the coach. And helping them build that level of awareness, build that level of understanding of what and how they do things, what works for them, in order then to perhaps do it better, and what can help them do it better, and challenge people to continually do it better.
What advice would we give to somebody in that place, though, who's young and up and coming through their career, and hearing from somebody who's seen it from so many different perspectives like yourself? How do we encourage coaches or leaders or managers to be their unique self and drive themselves forward?
I think it's being curious, actually, David. I think encouraging curiosity. Whether the modern generations who can access knowledge on their phones so easily nowadays, whether they're as curious about people as perhaps they could be, I would challenge them to be a bit more curious. I don't think coaches are really ever satisfied. Right. We're always striving for perfect performance. My phrase is, how can you get perfection in an imperfect world? But we can strive for excellence. So striving to be excellent in the moment, dealing with the moment, making good choices, making excellent choices. And we all make mistakes. That's a part of learning as well. But we need a strive for mastering the skills, mastery, excellence as words rather than perfection for me, which is almost unattainable.
And how did you do that for you? How did you break that that tension between the striving for perfection and actually mastering your skills? How did you manage yourself through your career to do that?
I think when you become national coach, you have to go into the job wanting to change the world, wanting to make a difference, wanting to strive for excellence, for those results. The reality is we all get replaced at some time, and therefore add value, leave it better than you found it, and then we have to move on. Of course, those are painful experiences, aren't they? Because, we've all, perhaps as coaches, had the sack at some time, and it is a painful, hurtful experience. But you don't become a bad coach overnight. And when you get the next job and look back at why you felt like that, you realize you've got still a lot to offer, and that you can achieve things. But we are in that results business.
How did you manage that? When you hit those kind of rough, rocky times where you're under a lot of pressure, maybe lost your job, how do you recover from that? Because, again, I'm thinking about people listening in here. We're in a world nowadays where there's lots of lows as well as some highs, and people have to navigate through those times. And I'm just wondering what advice you might give.
And it is tough, and it's that sense of perspective. Right. So at the darkest times, the sun will rise tomorrow. Anyway, at the happiest times, there's a cloud around the corner probably. So you have to deal with winning and losing in the same way. One of the toughest things about being a national coach is the media scrutiny, and scrutiny can be debilitating for a coach, and under massive media scrutiny, where sometimes it's only the result that matters, and we understand that. But the media criticism that goes with a job that you cope with as the coach is tough to coach for your family, for your kids in school, for your wife or for your parents.
Did you experience that, Kevin, quite a lot?
My mother in Tesco's, or should I say Tesco's, in the supermarket in Neath, once some wag said, "What's your son doing with the Welsh team?" He picked up the French stick and went for him. Everybody's someone's little boy, I suppose. Everybody's someone's son, and so it was tough for them to deal with the losses at times. And actually, if you just read the good bits, that's not right either. You're never as good as the papers say when you win. You're never as bad as the papers say when you lose. So it's keeping that perspective. And I suppose I was very fortunate. My wife always kept me, pretty grounded and back down to earth, and wasn't as involved as she could have been, because we needed that perspective on life. Mm-hmm. So it put a balance on your life. We lost a game. And it seems as if someone has died. But the reality is no one has died.
And probably having that healthier perspective is very useful, isn't it? In terms of being able to go again and perform again, rather than it to weigh you down and the team.
Yeah, I know. And one of the toughest things for modern professional coaches, David, is we're measured on results. And I hope you won't mind me saying, but Stuart Lancaster would feel that he is the only coach of a host Rugby World Cup nation not to coach the team to get out of the pool stages. So he's almost labelled as that. I actually think he's labelled as a terrific husband, fantastic father, a great son, really loving son to his parents. But we are not seen in those light as humans, are we, as people? We're classed as results. You only won 50% of your games, or 70% of your games, or 20% of your games, rather than human people.
How do we do? Can we change that, do you think? Should we change that?
I think it is difficult to change, because owners, chief execs, boards of sports organizations have greater expectations perhaps than the reality of their investment. It's easy to change one person as the head coach rather than 15 players, 11 players, or what have you. So there's a conveyor belt of coaches. There are a limited number of jobs at that level, at full-time level. I think the career is shorter as a result of that. there is a credibility hump that you've got to get over in order to get the next job. Otherwise, the second job is really tough. We are impatient and want the opportunity before perhaps we've built our knowledge, our understanding, our experiences, our perspective in order to deal with those pressures. We seem to import 50-year-old foreign coaches while we need to develop 50-year-old Welsh head coaches or English coaches, our coaches.
Homegrown coaches, yeah.
So it's a real challenge when those making the appointments, I think, are less informed than perhaps our coach developing fraternity. I wonder if they really know is it too reactive? Is it just the next name? Is it just the foreign import? I'm generalizing a little bit too much there, but
why do we go abroad so much, or what is wrong with our system then in terms of recruiting from within?
I think certainly, probably in football and rugby in particular, there is more of a club-based system in England and club-based system in France, while the regional-based systems in the Southern Hemisphere and some other parts of Europe are in more control of those appointments. So it becomes a club owner, club committee decision. And I also think that often if a chief exec appoints a foreign coach and the foreign coach fails in the club, then the foreign coach has failed. If the chief exec promotes the academy coach or someone from within, and that coach fails, I don't know if the perception is, hang on, you appointed him, it's your failure, your responsibility. Again, I've got no substance for that at all, but I wonder whether there is something.
Yeah, and you lead me on to thinking there, Kevin, also about the concept between that idea of winning versus development as well. And, having worked throughout the whole education and coaching pathway and system, I'm curious to hear your views on the sort of the tension between the idea of, coaching to have to win and coaching as a means of developing people and players. How have you experienced all of that?
Yeah, it is a tough balance. I think I made a lot of changes when I took over as national coach and started with young players. So I was planning for winning in the future. Mm-hmm. The future never comes unless you win in the short term. Right. So this balance of winning in the short term enough that you can plan and make the changes for the longer term and hopefully be more successful. But that's really quite hard to do. So the balance between winning and development is a tough one to balance. Even harder in the performance pathway, say, where every time in the England rugby performance pathway, and England under 18, under 20, and 17 went out to play the game, they went out to win the game. Of course they did. That's the purpose of the game. That's why we
play it.
That's why we keep the score, is to see who won at the end.
Yeah.
But the longer term measure had also in the development pathway is about the progression and development and the added value and experiences that we can give to those players who can win World Cup, Six Nations championships for Wales or England for the country in the future. And so there is a balance between it, which is hard to come by. So in performance appraisal, we used to, in the pathway coaches, have some competition goals. England under 20 should be, with their resources, top 2 in the Six Nations, top 4 in the Junior World Cup every year. Should be with our resources. Yeah. To do that, you've got to beat a Southern Hemisphere team. You've got to do really well. We want to win everyone.
Yeah.
But the key part is that was a performance competition goal. Then there was a development goal. What added value, which is harder to measure, of course, isn't it? Can we add to players and their progression and their understanding and their individual skill development in our collective team environment so that they move on to the next level of the pathway and so on. So there'd be measures with that as well. But one is more objective than the other, and we like objective measures.
I'm curious, I guess, to have things changed, do you think, over time? Have they got harder? Is the pressure more intense for the developers of people and, the head coaches, or not?
Yeah, I think it is because of having time together. Right. So a coaching team that comes together, you think of the successful clubs, they have some longevity with their coaching groups. And even in the past, they've had longevity in their coaching groups. In rugby, Saracens coaching group, despite their issues, Exeter coaching group have had time. They know each other. They understand each other. There's an alignment in philosophy, and there's a challenge and a disagreement, which is really hot, even conflict at times, because of the trust that's been created. That's the beauty of it. That's what longevity gives you, rather than disagreement, off with his head, change the coach again. So rugby is getting a little bit like football. There's too much change of the head coach so quickly, and that's your owners, your boards, changing much, having to change perhaps because of results, and it's the old adage: the coach gets the blame when the team loses, and the players get the praise when the team wins, which is probably as it should be as well.
Well, you talk there about longevity being a key ingredient for successful teams. Would you say there are any other key ingredients that would create a really successful, say, learning environment? Because I guess that's what it is, isn't it? We're trying to create an environment where people can learn to perform at their best. In your experiences, what are the key 2 or 3 things, would you say, are really helpful or even
learning
crucial?
Environments are interesting, and having the privilege to go into different clubs, sports environments, you get a feel for the environment. This word culture, this is how they do things around here. This is what it feels like, sounds like, looks like. And for me, is the environment one of performance? Because we're in a performance game, a results game. Are we striving to improve performance? Is it a learning environment? Are players, staff stimulating, challenged, encouraged to learn, to get better, that philosophy of continuous improvement? And is it enjoyable? Is it fun?
Why is enjoyable important, Kevin?
Not fun, ha necessarily, but enjoyable. I remember a 10-year-old rugby player being asked, "Why do you play the game?" I love it. I love it on Sunday morning because we roll around in the mud, we have some fun with my friends, and we have a burger in the club afterwards. Great. The 18-year-old academy player, I love the, we have driven my mates in the squad, in the academy. We are striving to be the best we can. We enjoy being together. It's hard work, but we go through. And then they ask captain of Wales Rugby team, "Why do you play?" We love being together. I love coming together and being with the Welsh squad. It's about enjoyment, not fun, ha-ha necessarily, but can we create an environment that is performance, results, standards, excellence driven, driven for learning. I'm improving, I'm getting better, I'm hungry to learn, and this is enjoyable to be in this environment. Now, that's a good learning environment for me.
And my sense is that we can, from what you're saying, you can have those three kind of key components come together.
Yeah, and the other sort of, I suppose, model in my head would be that clarity of purpose of what we're trying to achieve. And often it's a question I often ask coaches: what's the purpose? What's the purpose of that drill? What's the purpose of the practice? What's the purpose of that game? What's the purpose of that session? What's the purpose of the academy? What's the purpose of the club? I'm getting some clarity and alignment about almost a beyond winning purpose, where winning is a byproduct of striving towards something greater, perhaps. What roles and responsibilities and people will help us achieve that purpose, are aligned, connected, identify with the purpose, that we can pull together, and that they can fulfill their role to achieve the purpose, but support each other in a more interconnected way to achieve the purpose. Thirdly, how do we operate? How do we make decisions? How do we communicate? What are our processes? What is how do we organize things? How do we plan the week? How do we structure the week to allow those roles and responsibilities, those people to do the job to achieve the purpose? All underpinned by, this is how we treat people around here. This is an environment of respect, of openness, of honesty, of calling people out if they don't reflect the values of the organization, of celebrating them when they do, of challenging without blame, without threat, and openness. That's why I think teams go to culture and values and those sort of things first.
Okay, how do we do it to move that forward, do you think, to make that come to life? And probably a second thought would be, and where have you experienced that, or where do you notice it coming to life? Because lots of people might hear, right, that's brilliant, we want a piece of that, but how do we achieve it? Or who could we go and learn from? Not copy, but who could we learn from?
Well, I go back to Saracens and Exeter. Both have, I think, terrific, positive, high performance environments, but they do it differently. There is some longevity with the coaching management group. There is change. There is change in the playing group. What and how they do things may be slightly different as well. Experiencing those, implementing it is really tough. How do we do it isn't easy. I often think that coaches need some clarity about what, how, and why they do things the way they do. So what's your coaching philosophy? What's your playing philosophy? What's your coaching approach? Can you describe it? Can you articulate it? Can you sell it and get buy-in to get everybody pulling in that direction? Can we still value diversity, challenge in there to make us think again, to take it further? Again, simple to say, but not easy to put into operation with 40 different personalities of individual players in your squad, 20 management staff, coaching team, sports science and what have you, a board to report to and manage upwards and influence or connect with. a spectator fan base to connect with. It's quite complex. Simple, as I said, high-performing teams, but not easy to implement.
And then moving that on, Kevin, and I love the way you've articulated it, because I think that's what we're all striving for, is to put our flavour into that model and bring it to life. And I also really appreciate your sense of that. Actually, there is no one way of doing this. It's how they do it at Saracens is different to Exeter and so forth. But going forward, given the challenges that we've faced in the past, but might likely face in the future, what are the big challenges or obstacles do you envisage sport, not just rugby, but in the sport world going forward?
Oh, gosh, coaching is about problem solving, isn't it? It's about, I say the difference between the head coach and the assistant coach. The head coach says yes or no. The assistant coach offers solutions. Should we do this on Saturday against that opposition? Shall we do this? Shall we change this? And the head coach makes a decision, yes, no. So there's decision making and problem solving. That is an obstacle. Yeah. There's always a challenge dealing with winning and sustaining winning, sustaining momentum, regaining, turning a losing streak around, regaining some kind of momentum. These challenges, obstacles, what sort of obstacles? There's obstacles of finance, resource, and all of those things. But those are constraints that you have to work with. Who's the best coach in the league? Is it the one who wins the league because he's got the best squad, the most players, most talented players? Is it the least talented squad where the coach has come second from last? Yeah. So he's actually created something which is greater than the sum of the individual parts. Now, I think that is effective coaching. If we can create something which is greater than the individual talented parts that we have. Now, Liverpool are doing something this season. They've created an environment, and probably with the coach's influence, that environment, that collective, that alignment, they've got some terrific individual talented parts as well. So there is something there that would be interesting to learn about.
You raise a lovely question again around what is success for me, isn't it? Because is success winning at the top, or as you say, kind of nearly punching above your weight or your expectations, isn't it? And there used to be some league tables, didn't there, of teams with position versus finances, wasn't it? And actually seeing who was scored highest with the least finance kind of was the successful team. And I just think that's a lovely principle. And again, for aspiring coaches, there's not that many jobs out there. Everyone's trying to be, wants to be the national team coach or the first team coach. But I also think it's a great question to put out to those people listening to really consider, what does success mean and look like for you? Because actually being a secondary school rugby coach, you might not win the league, but if you can create one or two players that move on to, to the next level, that's an amazing achievement.
And clarify the purpose and put it in perspective. When a coach says to me, I want to be the next England coach, I would never burst a bubble. There's a reality, isn't it? There's actually, you're just coaching the under 12s at the moment. But, so what's the first thing you've got to do to get on in that direction, knowing that the direction may change? So I think it's important to dream, and dream big. There is a reality and there's a sense of perseverance and perspective to move. And the path to that job isn't straight, and And that dream job may change in a year, 2 years, 5 years time, depending on how you navigate through the minefield of learning and life. But I think it's important to dream big as well, and strive for it.
Well, Kevin, when you say dream big, I'm a big supporter of that. You know, if you don't dream big, you're always going to potentially underplay yourself. A question I'm interested to just ask you, though, is that your style and your approach, you mentioned earlier on, is quite relational, you know, in terms of the importance of having relationships and showing an empathy with the people and developing people as opposed to just players. And I'm really curious around that tension between some head coaches or senior managers in organizations that need to feel that they're there, which are very outcome and results driven and push very hard. And I'm curious a little bit around, you know, can successful leaders, coaches, managers be relationship focused as opposed to just outcome and task focused? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think that is the balance, isn't it? If you're too task focused, you don't achieve the task, the goal that you've set, because you don't take the people with you.
Right.
Because perhaps you don't care enough about the people. Now, I know that I am more people focused and sometimes won't achieve the goal or the task because I care too much about the people. So I think that balance of being task focused and people focused and trying to get that balance, again, is easy to say, simple, but not easy to achieve, especially when we're talking about so many different personalities.
And knowing yourself as you do, what did you do to try and help you address that balance to assure that you took the people and were successful with the task?
I wish I'd been more successful with the task, really. I wish I'd won more games. It's understanding that you have to invest in, say, my learning is coach the person first and the player will develop as a result of being a better person. I still believe in that. So I am still people focused. However, I know that the measure will be results. And those results, we are task focused, those outcomes. So we have to get that balance. The other thing about data analytics and analysis in sport, which can, not everything that's measured by so much analysis nowadays is important. Not everything that's important can be measured. So there's that, again, that balance is a skill of the coach, is interpreting analysis into coaching and performance improvement. Because the science side, coaching is about the craft, the art, and the science, isn't it? And sometimes coaches are going to be better at the science, and scientists are going to be better at the art of it. I'm not sure I've answered your question.
No, you have. You've given a real sense of what's going on there, and actually, I'm hearing from you that actually it is a balance. That actually being just task focused won't only be successful. Again, I picked up here some coaches that I talk to and individuals in businesses that I talk to say, I have to be very hard-nosed, very focused on the task to get the job done because I want to be the next chief exec. And I hear very strongly from what you're saying is, you need to take the people with you. Otherwise you won't achieve it or it'll fall down, and that's what's really important for me, because playing it here, I'm a strong believer is that, you can be successful by taking the people with you, not just by getting the job done, but I hear from your experiences and your learnings that it's actually really knowing what your preference is here and being aware of it to make sure you get the right balance along the way, because you might need to turn one aspect up, i.e. the task, if you're not that task focused, the more people, or you might need to turn up the more people focused if you're solely task driven.
And I'm a bit of a reflector, so I've had to understand that and hit the button to send. Otherwise, I'll wait too long and miss the moment on it. Most people, we say, sleep on it, don't they, before you hit the button and send the email. So it's that level of, and you've mentioned it a few times now, David, is self-awareness. So self-awareness, self-management, self-coaching, I would call it, is really important, as is awareness of others, in order to manage yourself, to coach yourself, to control your emotions, to have a perspective, to balance task and people focus, or what have you, yourself, from that self, to manage your emotions in the heat of that battle, or when you're interviewed straight after a loss or a win, or what have you, to understand others, to be aware of others, to manage others, because that's where we got to get to, isn't it? That management, that coaching of others to help them flourish, to be the best they can be. And it's about helping people flourish to achieve their goals, which will help the team achieve the team goals, the club goals, and trying to align all that. Again, simple to say, not easy to do.
Kevin, was there a moment, before we move into the kind of some quick fire questions, was there a moment in your career where you recognized that you were beginning to self-coach, or that self-coaching and that self-awareness and self-management was an important attribute that you required? Or is that something you've just built on and gravitated and grown over time?
It's probably been a more gradual process there, David, but certainly one of my questions often to a coach in a coach development course conference forum would be, what's the key skill or quality of a coach? And in my head, my learning around emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness, awareness of others, self-management, and so on, seem to be the key skill of the coach. Of course, technical, tactical knowledge is vital, but that ability to influence others, to be emotionally aware, which is the arm around the shoulder, the kick up the backside, and saying showing anger at halftime because it's the right thing to do at that moment. Can't do it all the time, and then turning around and almost smiling to yourself in that you still have to be authentic. But coaching is also creating a resourceful state at a moment that will impact and transfer to your players and your team to get the effect that you want. So if I want to be calm and controlled, then my body language, the tone of my voice. If I want to be aggressive, I want energy, my body language, my tone of my voice. So we have to create a state. Because was it Wenger who said the face of the coach reflects the mood of the team? It's connected. So let's be aware as coaches that we can have that effect. We still have to be true to ourselves. We still have to be authentic in our leadership of the team, in our coaching. But we have to create a state that transfers to the players to get a reaction that influences to improve performance after halftime, before the game, the end of the game.
You pick up on a thought of mine, which is very much around the importance of not just a coach, but as a people developer, which is the sole role you played throughout your career, whether it be a PE teacher, a head coach, or whatever. You've been developer of people. Is the importance of connection there? As you're talking to me there, I'm just thinking all of this is about changing your state to ensure a solid and a purposeful connection with others to help them achieve a goal. And again, probably a theme from our discussion today is that it's easy to say but hard to do, and that seems to be something that's dropping out quite a lot here. But without knowing it and thinking about it and being conscious of it, it's near on impossible, I guess. But the fact we're beginning to articulate it and therefore encourage others to really think about it, dig a little bit deeper and make sense of it, then hopefully it becomes that little bit easier.
And that's like raising awareness, isn't it? And I think I mentioned to you previously that, look, I'm not an academic, I'm not a theorist, I'm a practitioner. In essence, a coach, whether you want to call it a coach developer or I don't like the word mentor, critical thinking friend. It's to help people be the best they can be. And sharing experiences, sharing knowledge or whatever, I believe in share and grow. So it's about helping someone be the best they possibly can be. And it depends, doesn't it? It's different. It's different. It depends on the context, the situation, the person, and it changes. And that ability to adapt as a coach, I think, is a key skill through your emotional awareness.
Well, Kevin, what we've definitely done here today on the podcast is shared a lot, and there's huge amounts of pearls of wisdom and little nuggets in there, which I hope that those that are listening can just take one or two things away, just to help them on their journey, whether it be as a coach or an athlete or, you know, a business leader or even a parent, you know, because I think one of our greatest jobs, where I know for myself, I use my coaching skills, is with my children and those around me in terms of really helping them be the very best version of themselves. So what I'd like to now do is just lead us into a final kind of section where I'm going to throw a few questions.
Sorry, David, before you do that?
Yeah, sure.
There's no right or wrong way. And I'm not saying my way is the right way. I'm saying I'm happy to share with I think works for me based on my personality, my experience. I think coaches, if we use right and wrong, players don't want to be wrong. They don't volunteer if they think they're going to be wrong. If we can use good or not so good, that's a good answer. That's a good decision. That was a good execution of that kick or scrum or whatever it is. That wasn't so good. How could we make that better? Right and wrong is too black and white. And often we use that. I think players don't want to get it wrong, but they want to do it better. And if we can use that language, and what I'm saying is, my way isn't the right way or a wrong way. It could be a good way or a not so good way, depending on who you are and what you take from it. I'm happy to share it. So, you know, that's been a pleasure. No, you're going to grill me again, right?
Well, and you actually play on a really important aspect for me, and it's become even more so over the last probably year or so, is the importance of the language we use. You know, and you're really highlighting that the subtleties of one or two different words can make a very big difference in terms of how we connect with individuals or help them move forward. And, you know, I really like that language there that you've used. And interestingly enough, on our previous podcast, a gentleman shared a book about leadership is language, and about the language we use is really purposeful. You know, so
David Markey,
David Markey. And again, I think as coaches, people developers, whatever we call them, those that are helping others maximize who they are and how we relate to them, we need to be conscious of our language, because we can turn somebody off very easily, and actually we can help somebody really flower and glow and flourish very easily as well. So you make a really, really great point.
As coaches, we're notorious for looking at what players can't do rather than what they can do. Let's, celebrate people's strengths, really.
On that note, can I take us to asking you a little bit around kind of some books or some reading that you've recently done or in the past that have really had a big impact on you and your direction, which might, you know, again, spark an interest in one of our listeners?
So you mentioned David Markey, and his first book is Turn the Ship Around, which is about leadership in a submarine in the Navy. His second book is about leadership is language. So that's really interesting. I think the coach is a leader. Yeah. So I'm interested in leadership. A legacy, many people would know James Kerr's book, Legacy, but Legacy is 15 leadership lessons from the All Blacks. So it's about leadership development as well. I like, there's another good book by Richard Heitner called Consigliere. And Consigliere is the Mafia's number 2. And Richard Heitner was number 2 in a big company, Saatchi & Saatchi, I think it was. Became number 1 in another company, realized he was better suited and had more influence as being number 2, so went back to being number 2. So it's about leading from the shadows. It's not necessarily about being the head coach, the director of rugby, whatever it is. It's about the influence as a leader from the shadows. And I think Consigliere is a good book. I like Rick Charlesworth's books. Rick Charlesworth was the Australian hockey coach that won the 96 Olympics. And then again in 2000. And the second book he did, I think, is called Staying at the Top. And that's achieving success and sustaining success. What do you do to change things, freshen things, identify players that can do it again? He's written a new book, actually. It's not so good, I think. But his best book is Shakespeare the Coach. Have you come across Shakespeare the Coach?
Yeah. You're the first person that's ever mentioned it on the podcast, though, so that's great, because I have come upon it, and I know that it's a really kind of a book that was before its time, I think, in many ways.
I know it's typical of Charlesworth and how he thinks. You know, he was a doctor, a politician, a successful coach. Taking Shakespeare's quotes and language and turning them into influence in coaching and sport. It's terrific. When I left the RFU, I gave a few coaches a copy of it as a little bit of light reading, but it's very interesting. I liked, and I would say, Gareth Thomas has written his autobiography, and Gareth has had well-documented issues in his life. And I wish I had known what was going on when I was coaching it.
Right.
So it was a terrific insight for me about mental state, mental focus of players. Although it's an autobiography, it had meaning for me, and it tells you a little bit more about the turmoil, the mental struggles, as well as the physical struggles that players go through. Sam Warburton has recently written a book as well about all his autobiography, but about his injuries. And last one, sorry, one more.
This is great. It's given a great insight.
Yeah, a book called The Second Curve by Charles Handy. And that's about the sigmoid curve, which is about, before your performance wanes, make the change and kick on.
Go on again. Yeah, take a step on again. Yeah.
And it's like second curve thinking. So when I retired, it was a great book for me to think, what next? What do you do next? Life doesn't stop. You kick on. So it's about second curve thinking, really. Sorry, I too many books there.
No, well, you give a great insight. You've opened up so many avenues, because I'd love to know a little bit about, with the likes of Gareth and Sam Warburton and those insights, what you would have done differently had you known. And the sigmoid curve, I think, is just fantastic, because again, in all of our lives, whether we're 20, 25, 30, retiring or whatever, there's always that little plateau where we have to go again, isn't there? So it's very relevant for the sport world as well as the corporate world, isn't it, in terms of careers and what we have to step on. So I think it's
and that, no regrets. Wish I could have done things better at times, been more successful, won more games or whatever, but no regrets. You've got to move on. You can't change that. Can't control all of that level of thinking. We go on, and what's going to happen next, and can we deal and plan for that constant improvement.
A couple more questions then, Kevin. One of them would be for me is, you've come through a fantastic career in sport, and we talked about preparing people to be the best versions of themselves. How do you mentally and physically prepare yourself to be the best that you can be?
I suppose it's sometimes you've got to anchor on. What I do sometimes is I think I was the 11th Welsh national coach. So I think there's probably been about 16 or 18 So I anchor on to think no one in this audience, that I'm quaking and my knees are knocking because I've got to speak for 10 minutes or whatever in this audience of 1,000 people or something. Talking to you, I was getting quite nervous really at the start and thinking, well, look, I was the 11th national coach. Let me anchor on to not many other people have done that. Believe in yourself, just share and be who you are. Really. So sometimes I think you've got to anchor on to something that keeps you grounded, builds your belief and self-confidence.
Yeah, it's a lovely one, isn't it? Because no one's ever walked in your shoes, have they? Yeah. And that's the kind of the idea, isn't it? No, I'm sure lots of people, and I guess largely part of the concept around telling sports stories is that there's so many people would love to have a career and an involvement and an engagement in sport like you've had, and many others, and hopefully by sharing some of these experiences might really inspire and engage and give people hope as to how they might actually progress and perform and get engaged in the sport world, because there's so many gems, as I've said before, and so much value and learning we can take out of the involvement you've had and I've had, and that's why I'm so passionate about the sport world.
I suppose I'm fortunate in that sport has been, as a PE teacher, as a coach developer, has been central to my life. And the game went professional, rugby went professional in 1995, and I got appointed in November 95 as the first national coach of Wales in the professional era. And I've been fortunate until I retired in 2016 to have worked and been paid in professional rugby, which has been a real honour and a privilege. And even though I was a Welshman working for the RFU in England.
How was that, Kevin? What was that like?
It was always the question, who do you support and what have you? Well, I'm Welsh. I can't help it. You can tell by my accent, can't you?
And nor should you. Should you help it? Why not be it? Yeah.
I'm Welsh, and I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of the passion and the identity and the belonging, and our love of my game as well. But I'm also, I hope, professional.
Yeah.
And so when I was coaching Wales, and on that side of the fence, I wanted Wales to win.
Yeah. When
I was working for the RFU, and on that side of the fence, I want the RFU to win. Because in a sense, it's a reflection on the professional job that you're doing.
Yeah.
Now that I'm independent, I want the coach to be the best coach he possibly can be.
You want the game to be the winner on this one? No.
So it's not easy, but it's an interesting. So I got RFU ahead of their time in 2002. They advertised for a head of elite coach development, the first job in any sport to invest in helping our best coaches get better. So I got interviewed, and a couple of years earlier, I was coaching against Clive Woodward, Frank Cotton, Chris Spice, the performance director, someone from Sport England. So I got interviewed for this job as head of elite coach development at the RFU. And the any questions type of question at the end was, I said to them, how do you know if I got the job, how do you know if I was doing a good job? What does success look like?
And you asked them that question.
I asked them, how would you know if I was doing a good job, if I was successful in getting it? And it's always a good question, isn't it? What does success look like to you? Which is a question you use a lot with your coaches, I'm sure. And Chris Spice, the performance director, said, if the coaches feel cared for and well looked after and challenged and supported in their learning to improve, that will be it. How you measure that is another thing. But it was a great answer. And I suppose that's what we're about in coach development. That's what you and I are passionate about, is caring for our coaches, to challenge them, support them, to get better.
Let me throw a different question at you then, Kevin. In terms of your career, which 2 or 3 people, and I know this is maybe a very difficult question given, you know, the length of your career and actually the involvement you've had, and being a learner yourself, but who's really impacted on you and who stands out as being pivotal, would you say?
I knew you could ask me this, David. I got 6 people here.
No, well, that's fine, because I think these are really important people.
Right, let me give you this one. First one, growing up in Neath, watching Neath. Neath had a player called Di Morris.
Yeah.
Di Morris was number 8 for Neath, number 6 for Wales. He was a miner from Ricos in the Neath Valley, hard as nails, hewn out of Welsh anthracite, perpetual motion, always in the right place at the right time. Every time Gareth Edwards scored a try for Wales, who was on his shoulder, who was in constant support? Di Morris. So much so, they called him the Shadow. The most humble, unpretentious, modest person you'd ever wish to meet. My first game for Neath was as number 8, so I wore his shirt. So I could have retired.
Retired there.
I wore Di Morris's shirt. My second game for Neath, I wasn't good enough in number 8. They brought Di back, and I got selected at number 6. So I played with him.
With him,
so
even better.
But the lesson there is, you know, what a role model for me.
Yeah.
As a dreams of rugby playing. What a role model he was. Now, my teacher in school, I talked about Neath Grammar School, Ron Trimnell, hard work, discipline, commitment to the team was what I learned there. He was a bit of a taskmaster. I mentioned Johnny Hunter, Northern Irishman at Borough Road College, passion, enthusiasm, hunger for the game, inspirational in its the magic of the game. John Dawes, captain of the 71 Lions, was director of rugby for the Welsh Rugby Union when I was still teaching and starting coaching. And he gave me the opportunity to coach Wales under 20 for the first time. So opportunity and giving people opportunity is really important. He started me on my career. So giving opportunity. His other phrase was, it's only a game. There's a perspective. Mm-hmm. It's only a game, win or lose. It's only a game was his saying. Of course, it's livelihoods now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's more than a game now, isn't it? It seems.
At the same time, when I was developing as a coach, there was a coach developer who eventually became the manager of the Welsh team during Graham Henry's coaching regime. And his name was Trevor James. And he was a coach developer, and I learned a lot. He was an art teacher originally, another teacher.
Another teacher, brilliant.
But I learned about creativity, the importance of creativity in your coaching, the importance of individuality, the importance of metaphor and meaning and learning, meaning different things to different people, which was great. We called him Clever Trevor, unfortunately.
Clever Trevor.
Inspirational guy. And the last person I will mention sadly passed away, but someone who was almost sort of by my side for about 40 years in playing and coaching was a guy called Keith Lyons, who was almost the founder of notational analysis. Wrote the first book on video analysis in the 70s, became head of performance analysis at the Welsh Rugby Union, created a performance analysis centre at Cardiff University, where all the analysts used to come out of, headhunted by the Australian Institute of Sport to head up performance analysis there. So he studied teacher, coach, player behaviour. And he was the most caring, supportive, critical thinking friend was his approach, not mentor. alongside you, walked alongside you, or almost popped up when you're lost, at the toughest time.
Yeah.
And I'll leave you with a saying, and his saying was, we all live lives of quiet desperation. And to be with someone, supporting them in desperate times, usually when you've lost, he was a terrific support for me at that time.
It's amazing stuff. And Kevin, what's really struck me though is also the importance of key people on your journey through your career and how they've influenced you along the way, and actually having the foresight and the insight that you have to recognizing how they've each impacted you is just amazing. And and I love that question, just because we've all got these, and I just want some of our listeners to also think a little bit around who are they for them. Who are the key people that have influenced?
And why, David?
And why? Absolutely.
It's the why, and it's a question. As you can see, I thought about it, and it's a question we would ask our young couple: who influenced you, and why? And of course, parents are great influence. Dad, my dad, come and watch, but don't shout, Dad.
Yeah.
But always there, always in the background. Always there to support, win or lose, with real pride. So it's important that people understand who and why.
I've got two last questions for you. Given what we just said about the importance of different people, is there anybody in your mind whose kind of sports story you would be kind of interested to know a little bit more about? And I appreciate a lot about lots of different people in your world, but anybody that still intrigues you, or you feel that our listeners might really value hearing somebody else's story in a bit more depth? Somebody that you maybe know.
Oh gosh, it's another story in my experience of going to South Africa, but what did Nelson Mandela say? Sport has the power to change the world.
Change people's lives in the world, yeah.
I mean, wouldn't it be great to, I know his quotes are well documented, but his interpretation of sport, the power of sport, his experience or not experience of it, would be, and I suppose that film Invictus is the film about the '95 World Cup. So what about the new captain of South Africa who won the World Cup in 2019?
Yeah.
Siya Kolisi.
Yeah.
What a story he might have with his upbringing and the influence of sports on him.
You press a real point for me though there, Kevin. Born and brought up in South Africa as well, and hearing that story, that one would really resonate with me, just understanding the impact of both sport, but also the apartheid regime and everything that's been going on there, and the links to what Mandela did back then, all in the kind of the catch-all of rugby as well. It is just kind of an amazing pot to maybe explore. So who knows? Let's hope one day we can find out a little bit more about that. And my final question is there a saying or a motto which you've really grown to really support you and guide you through all of your career? Because you've shared lots of lovely little sayings from other people as well. But is there anything that you just sit with that just stays with you to keep you grounded and motivated and driving forward in the way that you have done?
The simple answer is I end my emails now with keep coaching, keep learning. So where it's come from is when I retired, because I got asked to do some consultancy work back with the RFU, with the WRU, bit of work with Premier League football as you do, David, some other sports. I just set up a company called TLC Limited. And as you know, TLC stands for Tender Loving Care in most people's eyes, but it stands for teaching, learning and coaching, because my wife was a head teacher and is a independent schools inspector as well. So she inspects the quality of teaching and learning. And I said, what are you looking for? Because I look at the quality of coaching and learning. And she says, look, in schools, I look to see if the kids are engaged. Are they sitting forward? Are they engaged in the activity? Are they inspired? Are they cared for by the teacher? Is the teacher passionate about engaging the children and their learning? And I think players respond to coaches who care about them, who engage, who are passionate, who are inspiring. So the company is called TLC Limited, Teaching Coaching Limited. It makes no money at all. In fact, it's the concept behind it is what we stand for. So usually I sign off my email by saying, keep coaching and keep learning, because we actually learn in this lockdown period what learning we've had, but actually we learn from doing it. And there is no substitute for coaching to develop our learning, as long as we reflect, think how we can do it better.
Well,
keep coaching and keep learning.
Well, once again, Kevin, the way you've articulated that and shared it for me is hugely powerful and gives a real sense of the story you've told today. So, you know, in terms of a theme of teaching, coaching and learning coming well through everything that we've spoken about and what's really navigated your journey, but also in the manner by which you've shared what you've shared as well, in terms of that tender loving care. And I say that really solidly, actually, because I feel like that, you know, it's not just what we do in coaching, it's also how we do it and how we help and how we make people feel. And actually your style and approach for me today has just been about a genuine sharing to help other people grow. So I really wanted to thank you for doing that. And I know you often feel that you didn't have much to share, but if we put one or two things out there and one or two people pick something up and go with it, I'd be a happy person, because once again, sport is the avenue. You're sharing your stories and it's what other people pick up and take from it. And I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of people will pick up a lot of the gems and will also have really valued hearing your journey and your experience. So once again, thank you ever so much for sharing that. And Kevin, should anybody want to find out a little bit more about what you're doing, and I appreciate that you're retired now and, you know, you're doing little bits of work here and there, can they make contact with you through coaching and learning, you know, through TLC?
I've got no website or anything like that. You know, through you, if they contact you and you pass my contact details, I'm happy for that. It's
okay. Yeah,
I'm not that technologically minded to create a website or anything.
Well, and we don't need to, because it's actually, as you say, it's the difference is in the doing, isn't it? And it's the relationships that we've built and also that you've got, and it's very solid that. So what I'll do is, should anybody wish to find out a little bit more and make contact with you, then they can come, delighted to come back through me and we'll do that. But on that note, it only leaves me just to say again, once a huge thank you for your time and energy, and you know, let's hope things keep moving forward. The Welsh rugby team, when we get back to playing, are successful, and all the coaches that you work with, I'm sure will be successful given what you've said. So Kevin, thank you for today. Really appreciate it.
David, it's been a great honour and a privilege, and a bit embarrassing at times really, but all I can say is thank you very much for the work you do, but keep coaching and keep learning.
What a fantastic conversation that was with Kevin. I could go on listening and talking with him all day as he keeps offering little gems of insight and wisdom. I was particularly drawn to his connections with his upbringing in Wales and how he articulated the many people that impacted and influenced his life and career in rugby. For me, he had a very gentle way of sharing his experience of a hard and performance-driven environment when both performance and people mattered. I also loved the way he described the importance of continually learning and how he continues to demonstrate this to this very day. As with previous podcasts, I would like to pose a couple of questions based on my reflections. I hope they may be of help to you. Kevin asked or raised many questions himself, but I'd like you to think about the following. What is the purpose of what you are doing? The following question would be, Who are the key people who have influenced you in your life and why? Please take some time to consider these questions. Challenge yourself to continually learn and develop as Kevin did. As always, I hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. Please let me have your feedback so I can continue to learn, and a review on Apple Podcast is always massively appreciated. Before I sign off, I just wanted to let you know we have some really exciting developments over the coming weeks and months, with some Sports Stories resources being available and some more amazing guests sharing their stories. So it just leaves me to wish you a great week, look after yourself, and I look forward to having you with me, Dave Levine, next week on the Sports Stories podcast.